Sweet. So while Michael sets up, thanks everyone who's watching us for coming, and you guys for coming here. Our sponsor today is SUSE and Rancher Community, and it's a part of SUSE, which makes Linux and also the best Kubernetes distribution, in my opinion. And it's not just because they're paying us. I actually did use their stuff before I went to work for them, and I still use their stuff on my startup after I quit working for them. But yeah, they're going to do a thing for us like next month and send me a bunch of swag to give out. So that's pretty cool. And thanks, Sarah Whitlock, for doing it. Michael, how are you doing?
Great.
So today, Michael's going to do a thing on HITRUST and how to implement that in a cloud-native world, right?
Sort of.
Sounds good. And so HITRUST is a certification that I have mispronounced for the last month. So looking forward to getting to know the details of the certification.
I think I can do 1080.
1080.
We'll try.
You know what? It was working.
Oh, well.
So okay, it's still working. All right.
Is this us?
That's you.
Okay.
That's Fedora. Yeah, you're good.
All right.
If you hey, thanks our one concurrent viewer.
See how this works. I think I can go to.
All right, so now you're really small and your screen is really big. On the screen, so it's perfect.
Okay. Well, that's perfect, except for my presentation not being on the screen.
Oh yeah, it's on the wrong screen.
It's on the wrong screen. I got to figure out how to make that happen. I want to do this.
Well,
Why don't we do that? No, I can't do it.
Oh.
Nope, can't do it. It was almost there. Okay, give me just 1 second, and I'm going to try to send this
Send it to yourself.
to myself over here.
Oh, look at that.
Where do you say HITRUST?
HITRUST.
No, but were you? What was?
HITRUST is like an all caps abbreviation thing. Like you have to say.
Very particular about that crap.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can do this.
So who here has to do some kind of certification, like security certification? Nobody. Nobody's having fun.
Yeah, this is the worst. So
I've had the fun of doing HITRUST, but we have to do SOX and then have to do the 27,001 or something.
ISO 9000, 2001.
No, ISO 27,000.
Okay, I don't know what that one is.
Or 2700. It's not.
Super don't know, but that's okay because me not knowing is not a reason why it would be weird. Wow,
27,000.
actually working
27,000.
for a few minutes. This is going to work.
Awesome.
Cool.
I got your screen on.
All right, do I need to speak directly into the
No,
microphone?
you don't. That microphone is a condenser, so
Okay, cool.
they'll pick you up everywhere. But
All right.
should
Okay. I don't know how to microphone.
Neither do I. It's cool.
Okay, so this talk is about HITRUST, which if you're not in healthcare is the dumbest thing to be here about. But HITRUST is a specific healthcare audit that you get a certificate for, and I'll explain what a little bit of that means later. So I'm Mykel Alvis. I do a bunch of things, but right now I act as the security officer for a healthcare startup, which we'll go into shortly. I have been in software for about, December will be 45 years. And I have done most of the jobs that you can do in software. I have done some of them well. I have done a number of them poorly. And in the big scheme of things, I think it's probably the case that that we can say that I'm a better engineer than I am anything else. But there's a bunch of stuff that I'm not good at, and security is honestly probably one of them. My goal always is to have as deterministic an outcome as you can possibly have. What does that mean? Well, it's a kind of a weird, it's a weird thing to say to people because determinism is not a real thing. In order to have determinism, you have to be a deity. You have to own the underlying subatomic physics of the universe to know what's going to happen. But you can get close. You can get pretty close. You can say, I'm only going to work within these parameters, and in those parameters, I believe I can achieve a deterministic outcome. It is not easy. That is probably the hardest thing to try to do in software. Most people in software just go, screw it, I'm not going to bother. YOLO. I'll throw something against the wall, and if the spaghetti sticks, it's time to eat. That kind of thing. And I hate that shit. I hate it. I hate it, and I hate people who do it because they make my life super hard. Because I have this thing that other people don't do, or they don't have, which is I don't like to lie. And the way that you work the way determinism allows you to not lie is you can say things like, this is going to happen, as opposed to, it might. Like, if you have a reasonably good handle on the deterministic outcomes of a thing, you can say stuff like, this will happen, or that definitely will not, or we did that thing, instead of, I think we did that thing, or I think that's going to happen, or I don't think that's going to happen. There's a huge difference between those two things. And if you're willing to put your reputation on the line, which I have been many times and have been nailed to the wall for, because I worked with people who did not have the same degree of discipline or dedication or stupidity that I have, then, well, it happens. So I am not really a security person. My job is a security officer, but I'm not a security person. I'm an engineer. And I treat security like an engineering problem, not like a security problem. Any of y'all security people? Actual security people? Okay, cool. Because I'm about to say some mean stuff. Security people aren't engineers. They're accountants. Their job is to determine a number about a thing and go yes or no. They're accountants. They're auditors to a certain degree. Under most circumstances, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying they're bad people, but that is what they are. They're not engineers. People who are in security and engineers are almost universally closet criminals to a certain degree. They might be not committing crimes, but their job is usually doing things like pen testing, which is kind of a sanctioned criminal activity. I love those guys. They're my favorites because their job is to make my job hard. And my job being hard means that I get to be more accurate about my representation of things. So I'm also not a very good consultant because I do not waffle. I'm extremely blunt. I don't beat around the bushes about a lot of things. This gets me labeled a lot of other stuff. Asshole is the most common thing that people say, but mostly what it is if you ask me if that's an ugly shirt and it's ugly, I'm gonna be like, yeah, that's an ugly shirt. I'm just gonna tell you the truth because I don't usually care enough to lie about things like that. In fact, I almost never care enough about anything to lie about it. So who you might be if you were interested in this presentation, which probably nobody here really is. It's okay. I'm doing it as fair to me, not him, because I have to do this presentation to 80,000 people next week. So what we're talking about with you is usually if you're here and listening to this presentation, most of the time you're a security person, and HITRUST is the keys to the kingdom in healthcare software. I will tell you more about this later, but no shit. It is a license to print money. And it's not easy to kind of get that across unless you're in healthcare, unless you are under the gun for HITRUST, unless that's your life. Then other people are like, oh yes, it's another certification. It is not. It just isn't. I've been through a bunch of certification processes. This one is not that, because like at the end of an ISO 9000 run where you've got all your processes in place and everything, nothing has changed. I've never been in a business where ISO 9000 implementations actually changed anything. When you go through a SOC 2 audit, they're really just checking to make sure that you've got certain kinds of business processes in place and nailed to the wall. Cool. That's important. HITRUST lets you engage with customers. And people in the healthcare industry won't engage with you unless you are either in the process or are already HITRUST certified. So the things I'm going to talk about a little bit of healthcare, how healthcare works. I'm going to talk a little bit about clouds, not much. I'm going to talk a little bit about CloudNative, which I think is a thing probably. I'm going to talk a little bit about security. I'll talk probably a lot about HITRUST, specifically about the audit. And then some other things about HITRUST that'll be kind of important. I'm not going to talk about my company. I'm not going to use their name. I'm never going to use their name. Don't ask me who it is. I will not tell you. If you don't already know, then you're not going to know. But they're not important here because the important part here is the rest of the process, what I'm going through. So, U.S. healthcare. Everybody in here currently in the U.S., whether you're a U.S. citizen or not, or whether you have healthcare in the U.S. healthcare is it's a wretched hive of scum and villainy. That's what it is. It's also the way that most people get to stay alive if they get sick. So don't get too smarmy about that. We have some of the most amazing healthcare in the world, and hell, within 5 miles of where you are now, you have some of the most amazing healthcare that exists. So we are kind of, everybody hates paying their insurance. We all do. We hate going to the doctor. We hate paying the insurance premiums. We hate paying the co-pays and all those things. But remember, 5 doors down from where you live, there's somebody who can't do that. So if you can do that, just remember, that's a privilege. It's not a right. Certainly not a right in this country. And in this country, we have a lot of regulations around that. Specifically, we have HITECH. Now, HITECH is the legislation that generates HIPAA, the Health Information or Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. I can never say it. HIPAA. Everybody says HIPAA. Almost nobody knows what all the letters mean. But so this was a thing that was built back in the 90s, and I'm going to say the thing that it's about. HIPAA went into place because people were digging into celebrities' lives during the AIDS crisis. Anybody who tells you differently they're bullshitting. That's where it came from. And it's a real thing. Digging into somebody's private life makes you an asshole. It automatically, nope, bam, straight to the end. You've become a jerk. Like doing that without a reason, without needing to do it, makes you kind of a jerk. And so this particular legislation, as it finally came about, was meant to help people be able to take their healthcare information with them from place to place, because doctors wouldn't share it because they were afraid weird stuff was going to happen. And now they're legally obligated to allow you to cart your health insurance information around. You want it, they got to give it to you. That's the law, just like speed of light. So the penalties for violating HIPAA are substantial. $25,000 per claim per time. So if you're a big healthcare processing company and you process millions of claims, you have full breach, see above this year, all you have to do is query healthcare information breach, and you will find one that occurred this summer, or that we found out about this summer, and it was big. But it happens, man. So none of these things are perfect. The penalties, the monetary penalties, are incredibly high. The ability penalty, the ability to engage with customers, they stop trusting you. It's a thing, and that's really all about sharing information. How can you keep your information private? I know that I am beating this whole privacy thing to death in healthcare. It's a real thing. You sign the forms every time you go to a doctor. You sign that HIPAA consent form every time. And that's because they want to CYA against PHI. And so what it all boils down to is the government will sue you. You screw up. You're required to tell them. You're required to tell them how you did it, how much of it was. You're basically going, I owe you this much money because I screwed up this way. You are legally obligated, if you are involved in healthcare, to do these things. And it's hard because protected healthcare information is a thing. If you have something that you don't want, let's say you had something embarrassing. Let's say you had some embarrassing illness, and you didn't want somebody to know about your embarrassing illness. And so right now, if somebody finds out about your embarrassing forgetfulness. It's because you either leaked that information yourself or somebody screwed up in the reporting chain badly. And think about the consequences of having a not embarrassing thing. What about you have a heart condition and somebody decides, we're not hiring a guy with a heart condition. You know, there's a ton of these kinds of things that come around. We protect people's information because by making it wrong to tell other people about it. You can never untell somebody a thing. You just can't. Now, that's healthcare. Healthcare is dull. It is. I've been in it for years. It's super boring. It's a several $trillion business, so it's can be exciting if those sorts of things excite you. They don't excite me, but some people get really excited about the idea of having 0.5% of several $1 trillion. They do. I see it, right? You know, that's what it's many billions of dollars just right there. So, but when you get involved in cloud computing, things get real weird because now it's hard to protect this stuff because you don't own it anymore. You don't physically possess the stuff. Cloud computing makes this situation appear where you've decided to hand off the responsibility of running the hardware to somebody and you're just going to use it in whatever way you're planning on using it. It's kind of a big deal. I mean, again, I don't think I have to stretch too far for somebody to understand that if somebody broke into your data center, like where you had the perimeter security in place and where you had guards and you had locked doors, and somebody breaks in there and steals hard drives from that, that's a different story from like somebody having a backdoor into your cloud computing facility and just slowly draining that stuff away and you never knowing. That's a thing. And then there's cloud native. And the reason that I'm having this talk is because cloud native is ostensibly a thing. So cloud native is really about running scalable stuff. People theoretically say that a cloud native application is more scalable, that it's potentially a lot of things. And, you know, cool. That's awesome. If you say so. I've been in software for a super long time. And software sucks. It's the worst. And software developers are the worst. And software operators are the worst. And software security engineers are the worst. Because it's a very complicated problem that everybody would really rather was a little smarter, they were a little smarter and it was a little easier, and that we could let's just ignore this really hard edge over here, because if we ignore that, our job gets super easy. How do I know that people like that exist? Well, because I used to be one of those people. I still am. I write software probably every day. Honestly, you know, on 4 days a week, I've written some number of lines of code. I'm a security engineer. So, you know, our developers, they're writing real code, real domain code. And I don't know, you know, are they good at it? Sure, let's say yes. They're not bad at it because I don't even know if we know what bad is. I don't even know if we know what good is. But what we talk about is, you know, does it run? Can you run tests against it? That sort of thing. And so cloud native is theoretically a runtime environment that you can achieve some additional lift with. So if you're cloud native, it's probably a good thing, honestly, because first of all, it's modern-ish. The other part is it's probably scalable and it's probably repeatable. You probably have some repeatable processes and you probably have some automation around it. And you might have some isolation against your problems and you might not. But it's got stuff that people want. All the cool kids are doing it. And okay, cool. I mean, that's a reason to do stuff, especially in a hiring market like what we have now, where you can't hire people to do, I mean, heck, apparently they can't hire people at the KFC. So, and you can't hire developers for less than a stupid amount of money right now. I mean, I hope that this presentation and the recording thereof gets outdated as quickly as possible. But the truth of the matter is, it is a seller's market if you have software engineering skills. So when you say you're going to be cloud native, it's part of the reason is that it's cool and people want to come to it. The other part is it lets you build this blah, 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 scalable, blah, 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 dynamic, blah, 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 blah. And also, it's a lot cheaper to run. And also, it's a lot cheaper to run. And did I mention that it is a lot cheaper to run? Because everybody's time has value. It costs you money. If you have to wait 6 months to get a machine in place, which I have had to do hundreds of times in my career, then for the 6 months I'm not really working on that, I'll be honest with you, every now and again, I'm just goofing off. So the implementation costs are theoretically easier. I think they are. I think they're much easier. I mean, that's kind of the thing, right? It's an API and not a rando dude, gender non-specific dude at the other end of a conversation who goes, well, I don't know if you're going to get the 6300 Edge or not with the 128 gigs of RAM. We just don't have the budget for it. You always have the budget in the cloud native environment. You almost always have the budget. So now we're here to this part. Why am I doing this? I work for an ostensibly cloud native company in healthcare who is working toward a HITRUST certification. And I am the person working. I don't have anybody else. I have a guy who's shadowing me. And this shit ain't easy. I'm gonna tell you, it's actively hard. And some of it is hard because you didn't know it ahead of time. And knowing some of these things ahead of time can make some of it a lot less hard. Had I known what I'm about to tell you 8, 9, 10 months ago when I started this process, that process would have gone very differently, very differently. So I'm going to try to impart some of the reasons why HITRUST is a thing and why this particular situation we're doing is why this conversation is important. So everybody talks about their journey to digital transformation. Well, where are you in your journey to digital transformation? This is some insulting bullshit that comes around all the time. Everybody wants to know, where are you in your journey to digital transformation? Let me tell you the best way to answer that. We're not. We started out digital, fully digital. We started out in cloud native. That's the best answer you can get. We started out at full speed. We didn't have to take a lift and shift from some data center and try to move it into some cloud provider and try to get some containerization or some sort of serverless architecture around it or something along those lines. We started from the beginning. We built it like that. Not everybody gets to do that. Because transformation is hard. The reason you want to start that way is transformation is hard as heck. Taking something, like people talk about the lift and shift from moving from their data center to Amazon, like it's this, like, oh, you just lift and shift it. I'm like, oh, yeah, every weight you don't have to pick up is light. If somebody else goes, you just lift and shift it. I'm like, all right, bro, go over there and pick it up. I mean, it weighs like 80,000 pounds. Give it a shot, stud. We'll see it. Show me. Show me, Superman. Show me. And that sort of thing is, it's real. It's very expensive. And transformation is harder and more expensive than, reinvention, starting from scratch, is often more economically and temporally feasible than the other ways. Also, when you're in the part of this journey of digital transformation, there's a lot of fumbling around. Don't fumble around. Get a process, stick to it. If you don't like your process, change your process with the process that you have for change management. Trust me on this one. Nobody wants to do this. Everybody's like, oh, too much process. Yeah, okay, buddy. Okay, I get it. You put cabbage. Sure. Well, we work in healthcare, and then I mentioned the price tag for screwing this up. So now we're going to talk a little bit about security. This is my least favorite topic, literally in the world. I am way better at physical security than I am at software security. Way better. I was a bouncer for 20 some odd years. I'm super comfortable with violence and like perimeter security. I used to do security evaluations for buildings, especially right after 9/11. It was super lucrative to do that. And so software security, unfortunately, has been a thing that I've been like kind of trailing behind for the first half of my career. But about 18 or 19 years ago, it started becoming what I kind of had to do. You know, a lot of what if somebody asks you, what does Mykel Alvis do? Probably people who know me are like, he's like a DevOps guy. That's what they will say. He's a DevOps guy. Almost everybody will say that. They won't say he's a security guy. They won't even say he's a DevSecOps because they generally know I hate security. They'll say he's a DevOps guy. But DevOps, if you don't have security in it, you've already screwed up. So it's just been part of my deal for a long time. So security can be divided into some things. Domains. These are like sections of security. We'll talk about stuff like that. Like some of the domains that you might see are configuration management. That's like, how are you going to manage your configuration? Physical security. How are you going to protect the place where your stuff is? The building where people work. Password management. Like everybody here has seen the little thing where they try to change their password and it says, nope, got to have at least 34 characters and 11 special characters and one uppercase, and it needs to have some sort of kanji character at the end of it. Something like that. That's part of somebody's password management policy in that domain. Then there's controls. And this is where the rubber hits the road. That thing that says you will have 34 characters and it end in a kanji character. That's a control. That's a thing that you set and say, you have a process and a policy. The policy is that it has that. The process is you set everything so it requires that. The end. So policy and process are the thing we talk about here in just a second. So if you are at this point next week in All Day DevOps when I'm doing this, then probably a lot of people will be like, well, I don't know, man. But you need to be real sure, because this is expensive as heck. HITRUST is expensive as heck. I cannot tell you how much we are into it. I know approximately, I don't know the actual number, but it is a multiple of my salary. It's expensive, and we're not done yet. We're like halfway. So do the math. So now let's talk about HITRUST. So who here has anybody ever been through I know Mykel's been through an audit. Anybody ever been through a SOC audit, SOC 2, like ISO, any of that sort of stuff? You ever been audited by the IRS? Anybody ever been audited by the IRS? I used to work for the IRS. It was terrible. So HITRUST it's a thing. Like when I say it's a thing, it's like it's a thing in the way that, like, you know, being nice to people, that's a thing. You should do that. It's a thing. It's a real thing. You don't have to do it, but you should do this. And so HITRUST is this consortium of people who all are working in healthcare and security, and they all got together and they said, security sucks. Let's see what we can do about that. I don't necessarily think it's the best thing in the world. But for us, it was really great because we had no framework. When we started this, we had effectively no framework. We knew what we were going to do, but we had no framework. We couldn't explain what we were going to do to somebody very effectively. And that's what HITRUST really is giving us. It's giving us the scaffolding to hang our world on. There's a bunch of others, NIST, and there's a bunch of security frameworks you can get involved in. And I'll talk more about how those relate to what we're doing later. But so it's just an audit. The thing that matters is there's an audit. And you get audited. That one right there, man. The audit. Your auditor. Talk to your auditor. Talk to your auditor. So they produce this thing called the Common Security Framework, which is basically what I was describing just now. It has 19 domains. It has a library of about 1,900 controls. That means you have to have a policy and a procedure for every control in each domain. And if you don't think that involves a lot of writing, well, that's what I've been doing for the last 9 months of my life. So yeah, it does. And you don't get all 1,900 of them. Most people get somewhere between 250 and 500. We are in the lower end of that because of the nature of our work and a bunch of other things. There's a bunch of reasons why that's the case. If you ran a hospital and you were trying to get HITRUST certified, it'll probably be closer to 900. And that's a lot. Let me tell you, that's a lot. It takes me about a day to just come up with one. And that's not all the supporting documentation. That's just writing the one that makes sense for us. So it's brutal. And each control has policy and a procedure. The policy is, this is what we're going to do. The procedure is, this is how you do it. Remember, that's important. Super duper important. It costs a ton of time. It costs a lot of money. It is extremely taxing. I will not do this again. I can assure you of that. in order to get me to perform this task for someone else, there will have to be an extraordinarily interesting set of compensation associated with it. The benefits. Why would you do this? Man, this is important. There's this certificate that you kind of want. I'll talk about it in a minute. But you get a validated security audit. When we get done with this, and we've gone through this process, professionals will have observed everything we do, and they'll be like, yes or no. If we get that certificate, which we will, because I'm not going to not let it happen, then they're going to come in and be like, yeah, your security's fine, dog. Look, well, here's, you got to do some things, but overall, we think you're okay. We're going to hand you the certificate. You get an ostensibly secure environment. That's kind of nice. And most very importantly, you get third-party engagement. And this is the thing I'm going to have to describe, because this is the boringest part of this. A third party is anybody that your company works with that is not a customer. That means your vendors, your contractors, your everything. And that includes your customers, though, at a certain level, because the customer is kind of a third party. And so when what happens is you go through this process where they come to you and they hand you a thing and say, are you secure? We're going to give you our PHI to do a thing with. Are you secure? And you're like, well, yeah, of course we are. Can you prove it? So usually there's a questionnaire. It's hundreds of questions long. I'll go into that in just a second. But you got this conversation you have to have, and engaging with your customers, especially in healthcare now, it is basically becoming a requirement, not an option. If you're in healthcare and you are not HITRUST certified, I guarantee you, you are either going to become HITRUST certified or you're going to have a hell of a time keeping your customers as time moves forward. This is just how it's going. I don't like it, but it's not the worst thing ever. But the way you actually execute this problem is you go to this place called MyCSF. That's the website that the HITRUST Alliance runs. You create your policies and procedures. You get this evaluation. You create your policies and procedures. You write all those things down that I'm almost finished with now. It takes a super long time. I don't care how many you got. I don't care how many people you got working on it. It takes a long time. You do what's called incubation. This is what I really wish I had known. Once your policies and procedures are done, in our case, there's several hundred of them, and you're what's called running your policies, or doing the thing that we said we were going to do, you have to do what's called incubation for 90 days. And you have to provide evidence that during those 90 days, you collected evidence for every one of those policies. So this is the bad part. This is the hard part. You have to write the program, your policies. You have to write the executable code, the procedure, and then you have to go execute it. Usually that's humans. And so once you've gotten through incubation, it's 90 days, then what you've done is you've said, I want to submit myself for an audit, so I'm going to do a self-assessment. Everybody tells me the correct answer is, we get hundreds on everything. Just rate yourself as a badass. Awesome. Because then it makes the auditor's job to figure out that you're not awesome. You're like, hey, I'm awesome. And they're like, prove it. And I'm like, no, you prove I'm not. That's how it works. That part's pretty cool. Then you get this validated assessment, right? That's what they're doing. They're doing the validated assessment against you. They go look at all your stuff and they go, what about, your password policy only has 33 characters in it. Your procedure says 33. Policy says 34. You get a little ding on that. And then you wait a while, good long while, sometimes a few months, because they get it. Your assessor gets 90 days to do that assessment, and then you wait, and then you receive your license to print money, which is your validated HITRUST certificate. You do this 1 year for all your policy. They do a full audit on you this year. Next year, when you're trying to get it again, they pick one policy from each of the 19 domains and they check that one. So it's less hard the second year. The third year, they do all of it again. And the fourth year, they pick one policy at random from each of the domains. And that's how that works. How do I know? Well, I asked somebody, and they finally told me. So there's policies and procedures. These are the meat. You have to prove everything, and evidence matters. The evidence is a thing that you attest to. So, and an attestation in this case is kind of a legal binding arrangement. It's probably in our case, it's a condition of employment. If you attest to that you have done a thing and you submit some evidence, basically what you're saying is, I really did that. And if we find out that you don't, then we're going to do what's called applying sanctions to you. Everybody's read one of these things. They always end with up to and including termination. Well, we don't really have much in the previous part. So mostly what we have is termination. If you lie to us by attesting that you did a thing that you didn't actually do and we find out about it, we're probably going to fire you. It's probably the reason we would fire somebody. We don't fire too many people. But for that one, yeah, we did. That evidence stuff is, remember, this is how we're getting our license to print money. I mean, our validated certificate. Sorry, my bad. And why is it important that you're in a cloud native environment? This is where I really wish I had done something. Most cloud providers are HITRUST certified. The ones you care about are. They are. And you basically have an anti-tax at that point. You can inherit tons of your controls from their controls. There's a whole segment on physical security. I don't know if you know this or not, but does anybody here know where the Amazon data centers actually are, besides me and Mykel? I know where kind of some of them are. But Amazon does not publish that. They don't want you to know. But they're HITRUST certified. They got a certificate. They manage all the physical security of those things. You don't have to worry about it. If somebody breaks into Amazon's building and you're an Amazon customer and they take your stuff, not your problem. You inherited 100% of that perimeter security. You can't control it. You have to get it from. This has saved me in ways that I just, like every time I get to put inheritance 100%, I get this little, it's like eating a cookie. Like a little piece, like it's like just like whatever your favorite cookie is, it's just like eating that, because now you don't have to do anything about that. Literally nothing. When it says 100% inheritable and your auditor agrees it's 100% inheritable, then you don't have to do anything. You don't even have to write a real policy. You don't have to write a procedure because you're not going to do it. It's inherited 100%. It's amazing. So AWS and Azure are both HITRUST certified, but it's really important to note that some of their services are not. So that's kind of, you gotta know what is and isn't covered. They publish all this information. You can go find it out online. And the difference between doing it yourself and doing it then is just like it's a massive lift. So, by the way, if you run your own data center, you're probably not super cloud native unless you're running. Well, I guess you could be. You could be running your own Kubernetes clusters and that sort of thing, but gross. So, get your cloud provider. This is important. Get one that lets you inherit their HITRUST certification. I would suggest one of the two big ones, personally. Not because they're so much better than anything else, but because pick the big one. Always pick the boring big one. Don't pick the cool kid. Pick the brute. Amazon, Azure. Those are the 800-pound gorillas in that room. Just stand behind the 800-pound. Don't screw around with something else. Oh, I love DigitalOcean. Yeah, screw you. Go get Amazon. Go get Azure. Use services that are inheritable. Never use services that are not inheritable. That basically that's like an inroad into your policy and procedures. Never make it out of that. Stay in their lanes. Whatever they tell you to do that. Like, oh, but we're cool. We did this cool thing. Don't be cool. Do the dumb, boring stuff. The next tool is get yourself a compliance as a service product. Oh my God. I could not do this without this thing. I use this tool called MyVCM from Ostendio. Ostendio is a great provider for this. Their tool, super boring. Oh my God, it's so boring. It's an ASP.NET application that's basically a huge front to SQL Server. It's a CRUD app under most circumstances. It lets you enter data in, and query that data back out. It also lets you attest to things legally. If I put a document in there and I assign it to you and I say, okay, you're the consumer of that document now, you go, okay. Like we tell you what consumer of the document means. You got to go read it. You got to understand it. And you got to say you read it and understood it. And then you attest to that, bam, evidence. And they just collect that stuff. It's just a giant audit log of that sort of thing. It's amazing. Because if you don't, you have to keep paperwork for this like a filthy animal. Like you just rolling around in mud and poo. That's what you'd be doing otherwise. The other super cool thing it does is it lets you crosswalk to other security frameworks. So when we're going to do our SOC 2 audit probably late next year. Probably. When we do that, like 45% of the work is done because we've said we're doing HITRUST in MyVCM, and the overlap in MyVCM for HITRUST and SOC 2 is about 40%. So I don't have to do anything for that stuff. I'll just use what I have. That part, oh my God, so good. The thing that I didn't put up here is that they also have a network of auditors that will give you a discount for your audit because they don't have to come look at your stuff. You just give them an account on your MyVCM instance and they go look at your stuff in MyVCM. They don't even come see you. They don't want to talk to you. It's a Zoom call. If you have to argue about your policy and procedure, it's a Zoom call. They're not coming. I mean, they might. I guess they might. I don't know. Hadn't done that yet, so we'll see. I was not a security expert. I was not a HITRUST expert. I didn't know anything really about HITRUST other than the fact that I knew what it was and how awful it was, but I didn't really know how awful it was. Get yourself some consulting if you're not an expert. No kidding. Don't be a hero. Go pay somebody a stupid amount of money to handhold you through this process. They know better than you do. They do. Even if you are an expert. It's like a little bit like being your own lawyer. Most of my friends that are lawyers will tell me that they would never represent themselves. They'll write contracts for themselves or something like that. But they're always going to let somebody else look at it before they sign it. And this is the real deal. Like those guys, we use our compliance as a service products, consulting their professional services, and they are amazing. It is the reason why we are as far along as we are right now. There are other services other than Ostendio and their professional services. There are many, actually, but there are fewer than they were because HITRUST has done a culling. They basically just went through and like, yeah, you're not really doing this very well, you're fired. They just took away people's rights to perform HITRUST audits. That's what they'll be like a consulting company who does audits. And so you'll go do your audit and they'll be like, yeah, you passed your audit. And when you put all that information into MyVCM and the MyCSF or people come and log into your MyVCM instance, look and go, oh yeah, it looks like you're gonna do all this. If you made it through the first audit, you're probably gonna make it through the second. Because there's two. There's one for your auditor, and then there's one when they validate your stuff. The second one's not really an audit. They're just really auditing the auditor. And there's just a lot fewer of those than there used to be. I'm sure that that space will fill out. So you got to get an auditing partner. That's part of the deal. Don't try to do it any other way. Go hire somebody to do your audit. What will happen is you'll get an advocate. You get somebody on your side. It's a little bit like an arbitrator or something like that, except they're on your side for real. It's like having a lawyer. So we have a person who is a HITRUST auditor themselves who looks at our policy. We haven't even submitted this stuff yet. He just looks and goes, that's not enough. Or yeah, you're fine there. No, he usually goes, that's not enough. But your advocate tells you whether their auditors are going to pass you or not. It's pretty awesome. I highly recommend paying however much money it takes to get an auditing partner that works well with what you do. I cannot stress this enough. We actually just stumbled into it. For real. We totally stumbled into that. All this professional services, compliances as well. Not the compliance as a service part, but the professional services part totally stumbled into it. It was awesome. This one seems dumb, but I'm going to tell you, this is a huge, huge deal. Your system development lifecycle is a huge part of any company that does software development in HITRUST. The SDLC is a real thing, and it's everywhere in like 4 or 5 domains. It's just like, I mean, it's like a shotgun blast across all these domains. And you need to have a formal SDLC. And may I say that? I'm not saying that because you should have it. I mean, you need to have one, because if you do not have a formal SDLC defined, you cannot pass HITRUST audit, period. It will not work. You will fail. Yeah, there's a bunch of them that are like this. Like SOC requires you to have a real formal SDLC. Like there's a bunch of these things, right? Like scaled agile framework and all that kind of stuff. Like these are just things. Go buy one. Go buy people. Go buy it. Go buy it. Spend money, not time. If you are not able to spend money on HITRUST services that get you to HITRUST, you're probably not ready to do HITRUST. I hate to say it like that. I hate to be all classist that way. But if you ain't got the money to do it, I wouldn't try. I mean, you can try. You can start. You can slug your way through it. But our compliance as a service professional services people have told us that people spend years just getting to the point where they're trying to get to the audit. We'll probably be there this year, into this year. That'll be like 10, 11 months of writing policy and getting our ducks in order. Sometime next year, we'll probably start our incubation period. And then sometime after that, we'll get our, license to print money. But there are people who go for years not able to establish their policies. This does not mean you can't work or do business or anything like that. It just means that all of the other tasks that this thing hands you, specifically when somebody says, "Are you HITRUST validated?" and you go, "Yep, here's the certificate." They just go, "Cool, come on in." It's like being well dressed at a club. It really is. It's like, "Oh, come on in." You do have to follow that framework when you get one, by the way. You can't just say, "Well, we use this framework," and then not do it, because you got to provide evidence that you actually did. Here's the place you're going to fall down. You need to know where your soft parts are in all your policies. I knew where ours were. We didn't have any. And so that was kind of important. You have to document everything and keep the documentation. And you need to understand, I can't stress this enough, you need to understand this is going to cost you a lot of money. It is expensive. And anybody who tells you they can play this game cheaply, yeah, they're lying. They're lying. You need to get your stuff together. Get yourself together, man. It's all about the process. The process is what happens. The process is where you're going to collect all your evidence that gets you through this. If you are kind of still fumbling around with how you do things, trust me on this one, because we are a little bit every now and again. And every time we change something, it wrecks policy that I've spent months writing. We've trashed dozens of controls during the course of this. Remember, it takes me at least a day to write one of these. So when I talk about that, we've killed months of productivity in my life. So know what you're doing. Like, before you try to start this process, you really need to know what you're doing. If you thought you got into CloudNative because it was super flexible and you could pivot on a dime and all that, sorry. You're not going to make HITRUST. It's going to be expensiver, more expensiver. They demand you have a procedure and a policy for pretty much everything. So yeah, and you want to inherit as much as possible. Be dull. Do not be cool. Be boring. Be as boring as you possibly can. Because security auditors are not funny people. When they come to work, they're not funny. They're serious. Don't be funny. I mean, a little bit of my problem is that I think I'm funny. And so I have to be very yeah, thanks, man. Thanks, appreciate it. Yeah. I have to sublimate all of my personality whenever I talk to my people. So the last part of all this, and we're almost done, Thanks for sticking with me. The last part of it is remediations. When you do this, you will be wrong. You're gonna fail some part of it. They're not gonna give you 100%. You're gonna score yourself 100%. They're gonna be like, yeah, you're about 87. Yeah. You're gonna have some stuff you need to do. And you're going to need to remediate those things as part of the process. And one of the things you have to do after this is continue to show that you have done that. Because when next year rolls around and you're trying to get that domain, that one control per domain re-upping of your certificate, the first thing they're going to look at is, show us your list of remediations for last year. Looks like you haven't done a darn thing to fix any of these. I don't feel like we need to proceed forward. Sorry about your certificate. So the remediations are everything, but nobody's perfect and they expect this to happen. I know this is not fun or interesting. It's not. I don't think so either. But it's literally a license to print money. This is how you get to work with gajillion-dollar healthcare concerns. This is how you do it. They're people, they've spent all that money and time and effort because they got a small army of gender non-specific security dudes who are fighting that fight, and they fought that fight, and if they fought that fight, well, you have to too. Otherwise, they give you this thing called a SIG, a Standard Information Gathering form. And then, like the most recent one that I filled out had about 300 questions on it. And they're not kind questions. They're pretty, like, very frequently you're answering them with, no. Do you do this? No. Do you do this? No. Are you going to do it? Maybe. But when you, at the very first question, I mean, like right in the top 5 or 6 is, do you have a valid HITRUST certificate? And if the answer is yes, and you attach that certificate as your evidence in that SIG, look past that question. They're just, again, you're well dressed at a club. Come on, looks like you got money. Looks like you were cool. Is that okay? I don't think so. You know, I don't think so. It's a pay-to-play arrangement. It's very expensive. All the big players in the game kind of got together and made that be the case. But it's not okay, but it is how it is. And it's unlikely to change. You're unlikely to change it. You're not going to change it. Nobody in this room, none of us are ever going to change that stuff. We don't have that kind of power. But it does do the trick. It makes you able to function in a given domain in a very, very effective way. Thanks for your time.